Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. What were you doing in 1999? Were you stockpiling toilet paper and non-perishable food items? Were you taking out massive cash advances on your credit cards because you knew that the bank would never be able to track you down after the system collapsed? Well, I wasn't really doing any of those things, to be perfectly honest with you. In fact, I don't remember a lot of what I was doing in 1999. But one thing I do know I was doing for sure was listening to the first solo album, Show Business Is My Life, by longtime Mr. T Experience frontman, East Bay pop punk icon, Dr. Frank. Now, the Mr. T Experience formed in Berkeley, California in 1985. They released their first album, Everybody's Entitled to Their Own Opinion, in 1986. But it wasn't until 10 years after that, in 1996, that I first discovered the band. Not long after moving to the Bay Area from my native Butte County, I went out and saw the band live one night. Was really attracted to their live show. Not long after that, maybe even the next day, I ran out to one of my local record stores. I remember distinctly that it was the Amoeba on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley, California. I found what was my first CD, and coincidentally, the band's first CD of theirs. Everybody's Entitled to Their Own Opinion. And from that point, moving on, I would say that my fandom was born. Now, by 1999, I owned all of the band's albums. I had seen the band live between 1996 and 1999 around the Bay Area. I had probably seen the band live probably 6, 7, 8 times up to that point. But I remember one day, one of my friends, or at least acquaintances at the time, I don't know if he was really a friend or not, but one of my acquaintances came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, did you hear about your boys?" And I was like, "What?" Because that was such a weird way to say, "Hey, how are you?" I was like, "What boys? What are you talking about?" He's like, "You know that band that you love?" And at the time, my all-time favorite band in the world was Generation X. So the first thing that popped into my head when he said that was, oh man, is there news that Generation X is reforming? Of course, at this time, Billy Idol's career was pretty dormant. He was still living in his sort of post-cyberpunk hibernation. And that was the first thing that popped in my head. Was like, oh man, is there some like Generation X news? Is Billy Idol finally going to like put out a new album? I was like, what do you mean? Who? What are you talking about? He's like, you know that Mr. T band you love? And I was like, oh yeah, like what? He's like, well, that band broke up and the singer's putting out a solo album. And I was like, what? Because I hadn't heard anything. Not that, I had my finger on the pulse of the music industry at that time. Quite honestly, most of the time my finger was probably up my nose. But of course that was like pre-internet, or at least pre-internet for me, so it wasn't like I could just run home and sort of look it up online. I was like, what? I hadn't heard anything. He's like, yeah, man, follow me. So he and I went up to the Tower Records that was in Berkeley, just a couple blocks up off of Telegraph Avenue. Those of you who are old school Bay Area-ites may remember that. And if you ever went into that Tower Records in Berkeley, a lot of the Tower Records, up behind the cashier counter, they had the big blackboard, which had all of the upcoming new releases and the dates that they were going to be released. And he pointed out, he's like, hey, look, man, Dr. Frank. And I was like, what? Because the band, Mr. T Experience, had just put out a record, I believe not long before that. They put out their Alcatraz album in 1999. I had seen them play on that album. Like I said, I'd heard no news of a breakup. And I look up there, and sure enough, it says Dr. Frank, Show Business Is My Life. So I get in line. I don't know what to do. I'm just like a 20-year-old kid about to have a panic attack. And I go up to the counter and the guy says, "Hey, can I help you?" And I said, "Is that Dr. Frank? Like the Dr. Frank?" And the guy, I remember, he looked up at the chalkboard. He looked back down at me. He's like, "I don't know. Who's Dr. Frank?" And I remember I was about to have a meltdown. I was like, "Don't mess with me, buddy. I'm having a bad day here." Of course, as it turned out, it was the Dr. Frank. I was able to go home and somehow, probably through a magazine in those days, I was able to deduce the fact that Mr. T Experience frontman Dr. Frank Portman did have his first solo album coming out. And I was immediately excited, although I still was very afraid that my friend, or at least acquaintance at the time, was correct in assuming that the band was breaking up. I think that he leapt to that conclusion after seeing that the solo record by Dr. Frank was coming out. Like I said, the band had put out a record, Alcatraz, not long before this record came out. I'd seen him play on that record. So I was like, man, this is all like, this must be real, like, sudden if the band is breaking up. Anyway, when this record was announced and I discovered who it was and that it was coming out, I was just really excited for this record to come out. Really, like, over the moon, like I said. By 1999, I was a pretty diehard Mr. T Experience fan. This band was living comfortably and easily in my top 5 favorite bands of all time. These guys were easily my favorite local band. And as the release date sort of approached, I could not wait for this record to come out. I just was so curious as to what it was going to sound like. You know, was this just going to be another Mr. T Experience record? And I'm not saying just another Mr. T Experience record, because I loved all the records, so it wasn't that. It was like, is this going to be is it going to sound like the Mr. T Experience? Is it going to be different? How is it going to be different? Why a solo record? Just a lot of questions were going through my mind. I remember as the release date came, I went out, and the day that this album was released, I went out and I bought it on CD at, I believe, that same Tower Records the day it came out. I remember going in and seeing the album cover. I believe the first time I saw the album cover was when it came out. I didn't think I saw any sort of pre-press, at least, as to what the album art looked like, but I really liked it. I really do love the album art on this. It's very like 1999 Bay Area punk appropriate. Anyway, I took this record home, and of course I listened to it immediately, and I really liked this record a lot. This record takes you in all kinds of different directions. This record has songs on it that are very MTX sounding. It has songs that sort of run a whole different wide array of styles and sounds. And like I said, this band had put out an album, earlier that year in 1999 called Alcatraz, an album I like. But at the end of the day, I liked this record better. If I were to rank the Dr. Frank MTX records, I think this one would be really high on my ranking, whereas Alcatraz, I think it's a good record. I think it's got a lot of good stuff on it. But I think it would rank much lower if I were to rank the MTX records, which I might at some point in time. I really loved this record when it first came out. It was different. It was something that I thought was exciting. It was interesting. Now, I never got to see, and I don't know how many shows he really played in this sort of format. I never got to see it live. I'm assuming he did do some shows or some tours. No, I never got to see this one live. If he did, I've seen Mr. T Experience live between the times I saw him in the Bay Area and the few times I've seen him since 1999. I've probably seen the Mr. T Experience probably 10 or 11 times total over the years. I think the last time I saw them was in 2014. I said this on the video I made about a month ago about the first two MTX records. I'm not sure how current the band is. I know they haven't put out a record in quite a while. I don't know how often they play out. I'm assuming that there is some sort of incarnation of this band still active. I would hate to think that there isn't, just for nostalgia's sake. But for me, this band really isn't just nostalgia. This is a band, Mr. T Experience, I still listen to a lot, not as much as I did in my younger years. This isn't a band that I would necessarily say is a band that's in my top 5 favorite bands of all time anymore, but this is a band for me and an artist in this record, for me, that's really like a time machine. It's like a personal time machine. Whenever I hear this band, I am just like transported back in time to being a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid moving to a city for the first time in his life, having his eyes opened up to a whole world that I wasn't exposed to growing up. And this band is really a huge part of the soundtrack of that era of my life. I love these guys. I've always loved these guys. And this is a band, this is an artist that I'll probably be listening to until they finally tuck me into the grass. Anyway, let's get into this record just a little bit. This record came out in 1999. It was produced by Kevin Army. He's a producer that has worked with MTX a lot over the years. I love his production. I love the production on this record. Now, as much as I love music, as much as I pretend like I know about music, I'm not a musician. I'm not a studio person. I'm not really like an audiophile in that sense. I don't know if a record like this is more difficult to produce because of all the different styles and sounds that this record takes on. But I think the production on this record is great. I love his work also with the Mr. T Experience. I remember, like I said, when I bought this record the first day it came out, I love the album art. It's very like 1999 San Francisco. I love the artwork on the back. Of course, Lookout Records. I guess you probably don't have to just be a Bay Area person to find the Lookout logo to be completely iconic. I know that they sort of permeated all of at least the U.S., but I know being a Bay Area person, man, that Lookout logo for a long time for me was like the stamp of approval. That was like a quality control seal. Pretty much everything on Lookout Records back in those days was the goods. Anyway, the first song on this record is a song called She Turned Out to Be Crazy. A very MTX sounding song. I remember the first time I bought this record, took it home and listened to it, and that first song started. I thought, okay, yeah, this is cool. Mr. T Experience just sounds like that. And that's not a bad thing because I loved that band. But that was the first song, when I first heard that song, I was like, yeah, that's a Mr. T Experience song. Lyrically, musically, stylistically, this song is very relatable. She turned out to be crazy, lyrically. And subject matter wise, it's, again, like I said, it's a very Mr. T Experience type song. Now, I don't know if you can tell on this camera, but my nose kind of goes down and then off to one side a little bit. The song is relatable because I once had a girlfriend who, she turned out to be crazy. So crazy, in fact, that she busted my beak for me. Now, I used to be somebody that was sort of ashamed of that. I was somebody that hid from that past a lot, hid from her. And there's a whole victimization, there's a whole psychology behind being the victim of sort of domestic abuse, especially as a man. And I'm not saying this to play any sort of card, because that's really not my bag. But for many years, I protected that ex-girlfriend for the way she treated me. I don't know why. It's just maybe it was a matter of shame or whatnot. But over the course of our 5-year relationship, She went to jail 3 different times. And as you can tell, she busted my nose up pretty good. Now, a few years ago, she reached out to me via email. Her and I have been broken up for a long time. Now, I don't hold any grudge. I am a live and let live. I have no time for negativity in my life or any excess negativity. But a few years ago, she reached out to me via email to sort of touch base, see how things were going. And I sort of fell into this, well, I don't want to say a trap, but I ended up corresponding with her back and forth over the course of a couple weeks. Unfortunately, my current wife, found out about it, who is an angel, a saint, perfect almost in every way, found out about it, and it really bothered her. It really hurt her feelings. Justifiably so, I must say. I'm not always the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to stuff like that. But it really served as a wake-up call. I was like, what am I doing? Why am I corresponding with this person who I haven't had in my life for over 12 years? Sometimes for me, I will just say this, and then I will move on, that niceness is my absolute fatal flaw. Not wanting to upset people or hurt people's feelings. Something that will probably be the death of me. But anyway, the song, she turned out to be crazy. I love that song. I love the lyrics of that song. Very relatable to me. I will say that ex-girlfriend, the last time she went to jail, I left. So that's what you have to do eventually. The next song is a song called I Made You and I Can Break You. Another song that reminds me of that same crazy ex-girlfriend. That was something she almost used to say verbatim to me all the time if I ever, when I threatened to leave or threatened to sort of improve my standing in life. I really like this song, though. It has kind of a 60s sort of pop feel to it. Like I said, that first song was very MTX. This song goes into a totally different feel, very sort of 60s pop rock. I love the sound. I love the lyrics. Really cool, dark, and again, very relatable, at least for me. The next song is a song called Knock Knock, Please Let Me In. To me, this song is sort of MTX sounding a little bit. This is a song that it kind of sounds like the story is trying to get back into an ex's life after they are done with you. This is also a relatable song. A different girl, but a relatable song. There was a girl I dated, not for very long. We just dated for a little short period of time. Things kind of ran its course, and she decided that she no longer wanted to see me. So what I did, instead of just accepting the fact that it wasn't a very long relationship and I should move on with my life, I made her and I lived really close to each other, and I made her a bunch of mixtapes. Now, back in those days, this was probably around the time of this record came out, probably like 1999, maybe 2000. Back in those days, at least for me, you still made mixtapes. It was a big thing to give a girl a mixtape. It was really like putting your heart out there, especially if you were a music fan. And her and I thought we liked sort of the same kind of music, so the day she ended things with me, I went home and I made her a bunch of mixtapes. And I remember I put them in a plastic grocery bag, and I walked over to her house. She lived in an apartment building not far from my apartment building. And I took the bag of tapes and I tied it around her doorknob. There's a little card I put in it. And now, at the time, I didn't realize that this could be seen as stalkerish behavior. I thought I was being downright romantic. So I ran back home and I just sat there expecting my phone to ring. With her on the other end of the line proclaiming her never-ending love for me. A phone call which never came. So a few hours later, I became impatient and I walked back down to her apartment to see if she had gotten the tapes. The tapes were gone off of her door handle. And based on just sort of a hunch, I went and I looked in the dumpster of her apartment building, and sure enough, my tapes were sitting right on top of the garbage in the dumpster. The bag hadn't even been opened. The card hadn't even been opened. So I guess that's how I learned that she was not interested. But it does remind me of that song, Knock Knock, Please Let Me In. That's one of the things I love about the Mr. T experience and Dr. Frank's songwriting is it's relatable. It's funny. If you're sort of an awkward, nerdy person, I think that we've all maybe done embarrassing things like that. The next song is Suicide Watch. I really like that song. It's kind of a folk song. I like it. It's dark. It's depressing. It's sort of a song that tells a story basically about you're only needed when somebody else is desperate. I've felt that way in the past with certain friendships, not necessarily like relationships, but certainly with certain friendships, I've definitely felt that way. Very relatable. Again, I love the lyrics. I love his songwriting. It's dark. It's like depressive, but it's also got like a really smart, sharp, snarky sense of humor. It's very self-deprecating. These are all values I really love in both the Mr. T experience and this record, and really all of his songwriting. The next song is one of my favorite songs on the entire record, Bitter Homes and Gardens. This is, if it's not my favorite song on the record, it is probably my second favorite song on the record. It has one of my favorite lyrics on the whole record, and I pulled the lyric sheet out because I don't want to like misphrase it or misquote it, but one of my favorite lyrics on the entire album says, "It's not the heartless things you said that keep running through my head. It's not the wishing I was dead that's killing me." And that is the goods. I love the song Bitter Homes and Gardens. It's got kind of an indie rock feel. Dare I say, maybe a little bit of a Smiths influence on that one. Maybe that's why it's one of my favorite songs on the record. Very indie sounding. I think it's sort of a nod to the Smiths, and not a half bad one, I might add. The next song after that is called She All Right. I like this song. I don't know if there's really such a thing as ragtime punk, but that's how I would label the genre of this song. I really like it. It's just a little like 1 minute long, little like ragtime acoustic guitar, jazzy punk song. I don't know if that even makes sense, but that's what it sounds like to me. I really like it. The next song is Ask Beth. I really like this song a lot too. This song at the time it didn't, because I probably didn't know who this band was, but when I hear this song now, the song Ask Beth always reminds me of that 90s Britpop band Sleeper, musically. I mean, Sleeper had, of course, a female vocalist, but musically this song reminds me of the band Sleeper. And I mean that as a compliment, because I love Sleeper. Very, like, 1997, 98, 99 Britpop. I love that sound. I love the song Ask Beth. The next song on this record is my favorite song on the album, Population Us. This song is sort of like an upbeat love song. I put this song pretty much on every playlist that I make for my wife when I make our little lovey-dovey playlist. This is this is like the ultimate us against the world. I mean, the title, Population Us. This is one of the best written songs, one of my favorite songs in the entire MTX catalog, Population Us. This is a song that, like I said, I put on every playlist. If you found your eternal partner in crime, I think the song Population Us. For me, it just really, like, honestly, it's one of those songs that kind of sums up how I feel about my wife. Honestly, it's a beautiful song. Very cool. I love the instrumentation of it. The next song is kind of a weird song also, song called Thinking of You. Totally different sound. It's kind of hard to describe. It's sort of electronic sounding. like a guitar maybe put through some sort of weird effect. Again, I'm not a musician. I really love the song Thinking of You. I love the lyrics, longing, love lost, sort of in the vein of a lot of the Mr. T Experience stuff. One of the best songs off this record. The next song is a song called I'm in Love with What's Her Name. This song reminds me a little bit of The Knack, with the way it sounds, sort of early 80s, new wavy, post-punk, very much an MTX song lyrically, but I really like that song. Not necessarily, the high point on the record for me, but I do like it. Really, there's nothing on this record that I don't like. The next song after that is 2 Martinis from Now. I really love this song. Again, this is another one that sort of fits, I would say, into that kind of 60s pop sort of sound. Kind of a modern take on the, tear in my beer 'cause I'm crying for you dear type song. However, I would not recommend drinking as much as the guy in this song. Even in my prime, which was pretty good, I don't think I would recommend drinking as much as he does, or at least as much as he claims to in the song 2 Martinis from Now. But I love it. Love that song. The next song is Sad, Sad Shadows. The title pretty much sums it up. This is a very nice, dark, acoustic song. Very dark, very depressive. But one thing that this song shows off more than anything else on the record, maybe more than anything else really in the entire MTX Dr. Frank category, is this song shows off that Frank Portman can really sing when he wants to. His voice on this song is incredible. I remember the first time I heard it, it actually kind of surprised me just how good of a singing voice he has when he really sings. And I'm a huge fan of all of his vocals. But on the song Sad, Sad Shadow, I feel like he really genuinely sounds like he has a really good singing voice. I love that song. It's dark, it's depressive, and again, like I said, man, his singing on that song is the balls, in my opinion. And the next song, the last song on this record, is a song called This Isn't About You Anymore. Musically, this song reminds me of, it's sort of, to me, this song is kind of a hybrid between the Dead Milkmen, the Mr. T Experience, and They Might Be Giants. Lyrically, I like the song. It's actually kind of empowering. I like that it's the last song on the album for some reason. I don't know why. But it's basically like, you know what, you're not going to, the way I interpret it is, you know what, you're not going to fuck up my life anymore. I'm moving on. This isn't about you anymore. I really like it. It's not necessarily the greatest song on the record, but I think it fits perfectly to kind of get you out the door. I really like it. Like I said, there's really nothing on this album I don't like. I mean, if I had to pick, I can't even really pick a weakest song on this record because there's something about every song I really like. This isn't about you anymore. Yeah, might. I don't know. It's not the high point for me, but I think it's a really good record. A really good song. Closes out what was, I think, a very great record. I remember back in 1999, I bought this record. Like I said, the day it came out, I was very excited. I was also a little bit nervous for it. I know that sounds silly, but sometimes when you have a band that you really love, change is sometimes scary. I don't know why I was nervous as to what this record would sound like. I was very nervous that the band had broken up, which fortunately they weren't. Like I said, this record came out the same year as Alcatraz. That is a record I will talk about at a later date. I plan on talking more about the Mr. T Experience on this channel. You're welcome. But I like this record a lot better than Alcatraz. If I were going to rank the Mr. T Experience records, which I might at some point in time, I think this one would be very high in the ranking. I don't know that it would necessarily be number one, but I think that this record would be very high. It's aged very well, and I do remember at the time, at least in 1999, this was my favorite record of the year in 1999. Now, if I were to go back and think about it now, would it be? It probably still would be. This would probably still be my favorite record for 1999. I remember the other record that came out that year that really just blew me away was the U.S. Bombs record in 1999. That was probably my second favorite. I liked Alcatraz a lot also. But at the time, I remember this was it for me in 1999. So go back and check it out if you haven't. If you haven't heard it at all, man, do yourself a favor. This is just a fun record. It's got a lot of different sort of musical influence. It's got a lot of sort of typical great Dr. Frank lyrics. Speaking of his writing, I mentioned this in the last video I did about a month ago, sort of in passing. I talked a little bit about his book career also. I did find this one in my mess over there. I have two of his books. I have this one, which is King Dork. I also have the sequel to this, which is King Dork Approximately. Now, on here, there's a advertisement for a book called Andromeda Klein, which I don't have. So next trip to the used bookstore, I might have to put that on my list. But I did buy this book when it came out. I really enjoyed it. I think if you like his lyrics, if you like his style of writing in music, I think it translates very well into this book. Now, I don't want to give you any spoilers, but if you look at the cover art, you can see behind where it looks like it's whited out, it says King Dork. You can see that it says Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. No spoilers, but the Catcher in the Rye plays a big part in this book. I remember for me, growing up as an awkward and being, even as a young adult, and probably still now to this point, but being an awkward, nerdy, neurotic sort of loner, at least in my experience, I remember the first time I discovered Catcher in the Rye was almost like a spiritual experience. And I didn't read that book until I was out of high school, which looking back on it kind of surprises me because I did have to read a lot of books in high school for the English classes I took. But I didn't discover Catcher in the Rye until my first year of college, when one of my friends I met on campus gave me one of their spare copies of it. It was such a spiritual experience to discover that book for the first time. So if you're a reader, or even if you're not a reader, check out Frank Portman's books also. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to give you too many spoilers. I enjoyed the King Dork books a lot. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store. Listen to Show Business Is My Life, or anything by the Mr. T Experience. Be sure to check back on this channel every Monday for Morrissey Monday, my weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content throughout the week. And until next time, my friends, I'll talk to you then.